Hello and a very warm welcome to Front Page, only on the AIM network, India's definitive media organization and voice on everything AI and technology. Truly a pleasure to have you all with us. A big warm welcome. But before we get into the headlines and what follows in terms of the stories, here is something which is very important for me to share with you, which is the fact that Cypher, India's biggest AI summit and expo, will be alive and kicking in its 10th edition, which makes it bigger than ever. It shall take place in October of this year. The venue is KTPO Bengaluru. So if you're very serious about your AI and tech, which I know you are, then well, I'll see you at Cypher 2026. And now, here are the headlines. The Electronics and IT Ministry plans to empanel up to 20 technology firms to modernize legacy government IT systems using AI, enabling faster digital transformation across ministries, states and PSUs through NICSI-led project work orders. After taking on Salesforce, Zoho's Vembu is now calling out Microsoft's pricing power, claiming a customer secured a 90% office discount simply by mentioning Zoho as an alternative. Indian benchmark indices ended June with gains despite a weak final session. Falling crude oil prices and RBI measures boosted banking stocks, while IT shares slumped on US rate hike concerns and AI-driven demand uncertainty. OpenAI has reportedly discovered new inference optimizations that cut model serving costs by more than 50%, potentially giving it a major advantage in AI pricing, margins, and scale. Acceldata CEO Rohit Choudhary will join me exclusively on Front Page today to expose how the trillion-dollar AI race has broken Snowflake and Databricks architectures, leaving enterprises defenseless against rogue AI agents and massive data governance failures. The Indian government does not just want to upgrade its software anymore. It wants to teach that software to think. And if such stories excite you, well, I'm pretty sure they do. Please like, share, and subscribe. It truly motivates us. Thank you so much for doing so. The Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology is preparing a major AI-driven overhaul of government technology systems by creating a panel of up to 20 technology companies to modernize decades-old IT infrastructure across India. And AI will be at the center of that transformation. Now, according to media reports, the IT Ministry is planning to empanel 10 companies under the general category and another 10 slots reserved for startups and micro, small and medium enterprises, or MSMEs. The empaneled firms will become eligible to execute technology modernization projects for central ministries, state governments, public sector undertakings, and other government organizations. The projects will be awarded through project-specific work orders issued by the National Informatics Center Services Incorporated, or NICSI, an autonomous organization functioning under the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The plan has been outlined in a request for empanelment, or RFE, floated by NICSI on the 25th of June. The empanelment is proposed for an initial period of 3 years, with the option of extending it by another 2 years, depending on performance, of course. Now, the selected technology partners will first evaluate existing government applications, identify obsolete technology stacks, and recommend the most suitable AI-enabled modernization strategies. Their responsibility will be to transform aging government systems into modern digital platforms. The proposal also actually calls for AI governance mechanisms, making responsible deployment of AI a formal part of program management. The empaneled firms will also modernize government data infrastructure. That includes implementing data lakes, data warehouses, and other modern data management systems capable of supporting AI-driven governance. Now, once the panel is constituted, departments will no longer need to conduct a fresh procurement process for every individual project. Instead, they can directly issue project-specific work orders under a pre-approved rate contract. Now, the selection process will include eligibility screening, technical evaluation, detailed presentations, and financial evaluation. Now, only companies demonstrating strong technological expertise will qualify for empanelment. And here, of course, is the front page take. Now, governments around the world are racing to modernize the technology running public administration itself. India now appears to be taking the same path by moving from digitization to intelligent digital governance. One of the biggest highlights of the proposal is how the government plans to use artificial intelligence. Now, rather than treating AI as a standalone feature, the ministry wants it embedded throughout the modernization process. Now, the question is, can artificial intelligence finally help governments modernize decades-old legacy systems without creating new risks around governance, security, and accountability? Please do let us know. What are your thoughts in the comments below? This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the IIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. For years on years, Microsoft's biggest advantage wasn't necessarily having the best software. It was having software that was impossible to avoid altogether. I'm talking about Windows, Office, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint. Entire businesses were built around Microsoft's ecosystem. And once you're actually inside that very ecosystem, switching becomes painful and, well, you don't want to do it. Which is why a remarkable story from Zoho founder Sridhar Vembu is getting quite the attention. Now, according to Vembu, an Indian customer faced a steep Microsoft Office license renewal hike. The customer then told Microsoft it was considering Zoho as an alternative. Microsoft's response? The price reportedly dropped by 90%. Yes. Now, whether that exact number applies universally is, well, beside the point, because the bigger story isn't so much about one customer. It's more so about something much larger which is afoot. That is, competition and monopolies. And why the rise of alternatives from Zoho in enterprise software to China in AI may be reshaping entire industries. But, of course, before we get into the depths of this particular story, and it's a wonderful one, I think, when Zoho seems to always come into the picture, that story tends to then sparkle. What can sparkle is the fact that if you like, share, and subscribe, truly motivates us. Thank you so much. Now, Zoho founder and chief scientist Sridhar Vembu has publicly called out Microsoft's pricing power after sharing an anecdote involving a major Office license renewal. According to Vembu, the customer was facing a substantial price increase from Microsoft. The customer then mentioned it was evaluating Zoho's Office suite. Microsoft reportedly responded by slashing the renewal cost by roughly 90%. Vembu jokingly suggested that customers renewing Microsoft Office licenses should mention Zoho during negotiations. Definitely sure. But the post quickly became about more than just software pricing, because Vembu used the example to make a broader argument. Competition protects customers, and when competition disappears, pricing power grows. At first glance, this looks like, well, a classic rivalry, Zoho versus Microsoft, a challenger versus an incumbent. But Vembu's argument goes much deeper. He pointed to Microsoft's antitrust history in the United States. Now, in 2000, a US federal court ruled that Microsoft had illegally maintained monopoly power. In 2001, the appeals court upheld the monopoly finding, although the company ultimately avoided a breakup and settled with regulators. Now, for Vembu, the lesson is, well, when one company dominates a market, customers often lose the leverage. When alternatives emerge, pricing definitely changes. Now, suddenly, discounts appear, right? Negotiations become far more, well, easier, and customers gain options. That is exactly what competition is supposed to do. Now, here's where the story becomes even more interesting. Vembu wasn't just talking about Microsoft. He was also talking about AI. Now, in the same post, he has argued that competition between American and Chinese AI models is important for countries like India. Now, think about what happened over the last year, just the last year. For a while, many assumed frontier AI would remain concentrated among a handful of American companies. And I'm, of course, referring to OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, perhaps. Meta. Then Chinese models started showing up. DeepSeek, GLM, Quen. And suddenly, pricing across the industry began, well, changing dramatically, collapsing in some cases. Inference became cheaper. Training then, of course, went on to take a nosedive. Open models improved dramatically, and the market started looking very different. The parallel Vembu is drawing is, well, obvious. Just as Zoho creates leverage against Microsoft, Chinese AI creates leverage against American AI agents. Competition changes behavior. It also changes pricing and changes strategy altogether. But perhaps the most important part of Vembu's comments was, well, not about Microsoft or China. It was aimed at India. For months, a common narrative has dominated conversations around Indian AI. India missed the model race. We are aware of that. It has, well, not done enough when it comes to GPUs, and it doesn't have enough capital. India is behind. Vembu disagrees, by the way, strongly. And this is why. He says he is now confident India will catch up in AI models. You're wondering why? Well, because the economics are changing. The cost of training models is falling. Open source ecosystems are starting to improve. Knowledge is spreading faster, and frontier capabilities are becoming more accessible. So in other words, the barriers that once seemed impossible are becoming lower every year progressively. Vembu specifically highlighted Bharat Gen, the initiative led by researchers at IIT Bombay. He says the team is making significant progress and hinted that he will discuss their work in more detail really soon. Now, Bharat Gen is important because it represents something India has historically excelled at. Not necessarily inventing entirely new paradigms, but scaling technology for local realities. India didn't invent mobile payments, if you remember, but it built UPI. India also did not build digital identity. It built Aadhaar. Of course, then we have smartphones, but it became one of the largest smartphone markets on earth. You remember that, right? The question now is whether AI follows the same pattern. Can India take global advances and build something uniquely suited for its own languages, culture, businesses, and more importantly, economy? Vembu clearly believes the answer is a thumping yes. There is another, of course, layer to this story, if you will, because this isn't the first time Vembu has gone after a software giant recently. Just days ago, he criticized Salesforce's switch and save 40% campaign. His argument was very similar. Large software vendors often use aggressive discounts to win customers. Then gradually increase pricing once switching costs become high. Because now he's making a similar point about Microsoft. Whether you agree with him or not, well, the broader theme is definitely consistent. Enterprise software is entering a new phase. Customers have more alternatives than ever before. Let me give you the list. Zoho, open source, AI native tools, new SaaS startups, and increasingly buyers are willing to challenge incumbents. Now, the most interesting thing about this story is that it isn't really about Zoho so much. And honestly, it isn't so much about Microsoft either. It's actually about leverage. Yes, that's the central operative point. Every negotiation depends on alternatives. The moment a customer has a credible alternative, the balance of power shifts. And that's true in enterprise software, in cloud computing, in semiconductors even. And increasingly, that's definitely very true in AI. Now, for quite some time, the AI conversation was about who would win. Today, the more important question may be whether enough competitors exist to prevent anyone from winning too much. Because history shows that markets work best when customers have a wonderful choice. Here, of course, is the front page take. Sridhar Vembu's Microsoft anecdote may or may not become famous because of the reported 90% discount. But that's not the important part. The important part is what the story represents. A reminder that competition definitely matters. The rise of Zoho challenges Microsoft. Of course, the rise of Chinese AI challenges American AI leaders. And perhaps one day, the rise of Indian AI could challenge both. Now, for years, India has been told it is behind in AI. Vembu's message is the exact opposite. Don't be despondent. Costs are falling, capabilities are spreading, and the race is far from over. Because in technology, today's monopoly often becomes tomorrow's incumbent. And every incumbent eventually faces a challenger. Now, the question I would like to ask you is this, is whether India can become one of them, which is the incumbent, or the challenger, or both. Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the IIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think IIM. The Indian stock market had a good month. Not every sector joined the party. But before we move further ahead, please, I would request you to like, share, and subscribe, because it truly does give us a great amount of motivation. Thank you so much. Now, while lower oil prices and RBI measures lifted investor confidence, IT stocks had one of their weakest months this year, as fears of higher US interest rates and AI disruption rattled the sector. Indian benchmark indices closed lower on Tuesday, but still finished the month with gains. The Nifty 50 slipped 0.34% to close at 23,865.75. The BSE index fell 0.33% to 76,478.67. Now, despite the final day decline, the Nifty gained 1.4% in June. Meanwhile, the Sensex rose 2.3% over the month. Now, one of the biggest positives for India came from crude oil. Brent crude fell below levels seen before the Iran conflict, trading at around $73 a barrel, which is, by the way, a massive decline from its April peak of $126.4 per barrel. Lower oil prices reduced pressure on India's current account deficit, import bill, and inflation outlook. And that's exactly what helped improve investor sentiment. Now, the Reserve Bank of India has also played a key role. The RBI extended its subsidized forex swap facility for banks raising funds overseas. It has also allowed banks to lend to non-residents against foreign currency deposits. Now, these measures are expected to encourage foreign capital inflows, improve liquidity as a result, and support the rupee. Now, according to Ajit Banerjee, who is the President and Chief Investment Officer at Shriram Life Insurance, the combination of lower crude prices, a stable rupee, and measures to attract foreign investment has significantly improved market sentiment. He also added that markets could perform even better in the second half of the year, provided no major new risks emerge. Now, banking stocks emerged as the biggest winners. The bank index gained 6.1% during June. Private banks also rose 6.1%. Public sector banks advanced 4.1%, while the broader financial sector gained 4.7%. But the story was very different for information technology stocks. The Nifty IT index fell 2.7% on Tuesday alone and lost 9.6% during June. Now, the sector came under tremendous pressure after US inflation indicators surprised on the upside, raising expectations that the US Federal Reserve could increase interest rates later in 2026. Now, higher borrowing costs in the US could lead global companies to cut technology spending, which is, by the way, a major concern for India's IT exporters. Now, the sector has also faced pressure after Accenture issued a weak demand forecast, along with growing concerns over AI disrupting traditional IT services. Overall, 10 of the 16 major sectoral indices ended June in positive territory. Among the broader markets, small cap stocks gained 4%, while mid cap stocks edged up 0.1%. Now, sector-wise, this is how it looks. Pharmaceutical stocks rose 4%. Metal stocks, however, declined 6.9% as concerns over Middle East supply disruptions eased out. Among individual stocks, Indigo emerged as one of the biggest gainers. The airline has surged 21.9% during June, benefiting from sharply lower aviation fuel prices. On the other hand, Eicher Motors has fallen 4.8% on Tuesday. Brokerages have warned that Royal Enfield could face pressure under Delhi's proposed electric vehicle policy, which then brings us to the front page take. Now, the market's performance in June reflected two very different narratives. Domestic fundamentals, supported by lower oil prices, remained quite strong. But global uncertainty, particularly around US interest rates and AI-led disruption, continued to weigh on export-oriented sectors like IT. Now, with India's markets being increasingly shaped by these forces, there is a question of contention. And here is that question. Can strong domestic demand continue to offset global headwinds, or will international factors once again dictate the market's next move? What are your thoughts? How will the markets react? Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM. Big news coming in from OpenAI. Now, according to a report from The Information, OpenAI engineers recently told colleagues they had discovered new inference optimizations that more than half the cost of running certain existing models. The exact techniques remain unknown, but the reported efficiency gains were significant enough that, at one point, ChatGPT usage from visitors without accounts was being handled using only a couple of hundred NVIDIA GPUs. Now, well, that doesn't mean all of ChatGPT runs on a few hundred GPUs. That's actually far from the truth. But it does suggest OpenAI may have found meaningful ways to extract far more value from the infrastructure it already has. And that's quite a development. We will, of course, be diving deep into this. And as we get ready to do so, please like, share, subscribe. And thank you so much for the support. Now, most people think AI companies spend their money training models. Well, they do. But increasingly, the bigger bill comes afterward. Every prompt, answer, image, coding request, conversation requires, guess what? Inference. Inference is actually what happens when a trained model actually serves the users. And at ChatGPT scale, inference becomes incredibly expensive. Millions of users, billions of queries. Now, thousands of GPUs running around the clock. The challenge is, well, even every percentage improvement in efficiency translates directly into millions and eventually billions of dollars. That's why companies are obsessed with inference optimization. The exact methods OpenAI discovered have not been well disclosed as yet. Industry experts speculate the gains could come from a combination of techniques, quantization, caching, smarter batching, speculative decoding, routing easier questions to smaller models, or some combination of all of the above that I just listed. Anthropic has a name for these kinds of breakthroughs: compute multipliers. Now, what does that mean? The idea is, instead of buying twice as many GPUs, make every GPU do twice as much of work. It's one of the most closely guarded secrets in frontier AI, by the way, because unlike model benchmarks, nobody publishes these kind of tricks. And that's exactly why they're very valuable. A lab that finds a major compute multiplier effectively creates virtual GPUs out of thin air. And this is where the story becomes bigger than just OpenAI, because AI is entering a new phase, as we know. The first phase was about, well, capability. Who could build the smartest model? That was the question everyone was asking. The second phase then became more about the economics. And the question then, which started to knock on the door, was who can deliver intelligence most efficiently? Now think about what has happened in cloud computing. Eventually, performance became quite similar, right? Then price and efficiency became the battleground. AI appears to be heading, well, pretty much the same direction. Developers don't just care about, well, benchmark scores. Why should they? They care about cost per task because, yes, that's going out of their pockets. Cost per API call, per customer, per agent. And the company that wins those economics often tends to win the market. OpenAI has a very specific problem. Its popularity is enormous. But as we know, popularity comes at an expense. The company has spent a very long time converting compute into growth. Now it needs to convert growth into margins. Now, according to recent reporting, OpenAI finished the first quarter with gross margins around 39%. The company reportedly wants to reach 52% by year end. That may sound quite dramatic, right? But in software businesses, margins are everything. A jump from 39% to 52% fundamentally changes the economics of the company. And that's why inference optimizations matter so much. Because OpenAI now has options. It can improve margins, lower the API prices, increase ChatGPT usage limits, launch more generous plans, but simply absorb future model costs more efficiently and effectively. Now, every one of those outcomes strengthens OpenAI's position. There's another layer. For the last year, Anthropic has been winning a lot of praise for model quality. Claude has become the preferred model for many developers, especially in coding, reasoning, and agent workflows. But there is one area where OpenAI may be building an increasingly important advantage. And guess what that area is? Cost. If OpenAI can deliver comparable performance while dramatically reducing inference expenses, gains flexibility. It can lower prices. Anthropic cannot, by the way. It can offer higher limits. Guess what? Anthropic cannot. It can also absorb competitive pressure more comfortably, which, as you have guessed it, Anthropic won't be able to do. And this is why the AI race is about operational efficiency. The smartest model doesn't always win. Sometimes the cheapest intelligence wins. Maybe, just maybe, it's speculation. There is, of course, another fascinating implication. The entire AI industry has been built around an assumption, which is more demand means more GPUs. But inference breakthroughs challenge that very assumption. So if OpenAI can suddenly serve twice as many requests using the same infrastructure, that's effectively the same as doubling compute capacity without building another data center, waiting for power, and all of it that it entails, which is waiting for the chips and spending billions of dollars. And this is why efficiency breakthroughs are often more valuable than hardware breakthroughs in themselves. They arrive instantly, and then they suddenly compound. Now, every future model will benefit from this value addition. Here, of course, is the front page take, which is the value addition of the story. Now, this story reminds me of something that happened in computing decades ago. For quite some time, progress came from better hardware, faster processors, more memory, bigger systems. Then engineers became obsessed with software optimization. Suddenly, companies realized that smart code could unlock performance gains without buying new machines. Voila! AI appears to be entering the same era. The next trillion-dollar opportunity may not come so much from building bigger models. It may just come from figuring out how to run existing models dramatically better. What are your thoughts? Do you feel that this could be a breakthrough which could change the AI race? Will the future belong to the smartest models or the cheapest intelligence? What's your pick? What are you going to do? Will you go with a model that gives you a lot of efficiency and you're okay to pay that kind of cost? Or are you willing to run longer with a cheaper model and say that that's going to benefit your development process? Please do let us know in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the AI Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AI.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ML file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Py project created. There is requirement. And this is the environment. So this is the app where you have a Py cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ml file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Py project created. There is requirement. And this is the environment. So this is the app where you have a Py cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
So in March of 2026, an AI agent at Meta posted incorrect technical information publicly without human approval and triggered 2 hours of unauthorized data exposure. It was Meta's second agent control failure within weeks. $1 is currently spent on AI security for every $735 spent on AI capability. And 97% of companies that experienced AI model breaches last year lacked proper access controls at the time. The average enterprise now manages 37 deployed AI agents, more than half running without any security oversight or, for that matter, logging. The AI race is moving faster than the governance designed to contain it. Rohit Chaudhary, yes, watched enterprises fail at data for years at Horton Works and built Acceldata in 2018 to fix that very problem. Today, the company has gone further, arguing that the entire data lakehouse model built by Databricks and Snowflake broke the moment AI agents arrived. Rohit Chaudhary is co-founder and CEO of Acceldata, and I'm honored to have him with me for an exclusive conversation on this and a lot more only on Front Page. Welcome to Front Page. How are you doing, Rohit?
Thanks, Sudhi, for having me. I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Wonderful. And the fact that you saw a problem and you fixed it. So please just first walk us through that journey, because I mean, this is something that you were seeing, and it was not so much, correct me if I'm wrong, it was not so much to do with the tools probably which were being used. It was something else entirely, which then caught your fancy and you said, okay, this can be something which can be well fixed.
I think so. I think if you look at the last 20 years, IT has caught up in such a big way. Pretty much all businesses are run by technology overall. The interactions with customers, interactions with suppliers, interactions with all your associated parties, everything is recorded digitally. More data is being produced than ever before, and this is only going to increase. So when we looked at this problem statement in 2018, we knew that massive data lakes and data warehouses were going to be the future of the enterprise.
Right.
And that was kind of the only strategic mode that these enterprises would have in the future. And therefore, securing them, running it at scale in a cost-effective, highly performant way was the objective that we started the company with. Now, interesting comments from you at the beginning that, AI agents are breaching, obviously.
Yes.
Security, privacy, governance, access control. These are big topics. I think the new insight that I would like to share with everyone over here is that we're going to see the operationalization of intelligence in the next decade.
Okay.
And that would essentially mean that, agents will access the systems that were previously built for human access. And therefore, those systems will have to develop their competence and become highly performant.
But tell me this sorry, but I mean, this comes to mind, Rohit, that the systems which were built for humans, right? So would that mean that you kind of like rip those out now from the infrastructure altogether, right? And you have new systems which are now more attuned to operate to the agentic aspect?
I think so. I think, the transformation of these current day applications which are in the enterprise is already underway. Assuming that, you needed access to your reports once a day, your agents need access to the same reports 100 times a day.
Oh, for sure.
And which means that, they have to be scalable, they have to have the right infrastructure, and they have to have the ability to aggregate data from no matter where the data sits, because agents require all the context and all the data before they can take or act meaningfully on behalf of, let's say, Rohit. Because, Rohit's agents have to act as Rohit.
Agreed.
And they have to have the same permission, the same guardrails, but the same amount of accountability and responsibility. And so if you think about the systems that are going to get used, they will have to attune themselves to the behavior of the agents as opposed to just humans.
But that's a huge cost one is looking at, especially, Rohit, with sectors like, let's say, banking and BFSI and healthcare, etc., because these are highly regulated.
Yeah.
So how do you see, those sectors in a way accommodating this huge shift that you are in a way predicting?
So we work with, some of the largest banks in the world, some of the largest telco companies, the Fortune 500 and the Global 2000. And week after week, month after month, the conversations are still the same. There's a massive race right now going on for AI preparedness. And here's how it's breaking down. People are looking at their data and they're trying to figure out whether their data is ready for the AI and the agentic world.
Fair.
Number one. And so they're preparing all of their data for this new agentic wave. Second, they're looking at their infrastructure and thinking, what is the right infrastructure pattern for us? What about security and governance? What about privacy? What about long-term data access and control? And what are the models that we're going to use? Are we going to use LLMs? Are we going to use a combination of LLMs and SLMs? So thinking about the middleware that way, middleware and the infrastructure. And finally, the third aspect is the training and the capability of the people who have to operate these systems. And every single enterprise is extremely focused on getting these three things right. Now, what are the constraints in this market? The constraints are that, you've got to run your current business.
Yes.
But you also got to prepare for that. So there's like a massive investment on, on preparing the business for the next, 10 years, because if you don't convert your business into an agentic first business, then you're for sure going to get wiped out. The second thing, which is also sort of super interesting for me to see is the choices that were made a decade back, which is centralization on the lake house.
Right.
That time is over, because...
Yeah, you said that. I've actually got that somewhere where I wanted to talk to you about.
Because the centralization is no longer true, because any company, any enterprise cannot wait for an expensive multi-year migration project.
I'd like to quote you on this one. for everyone watching, this is what Rohit had said, and I quote, "The lakehouse architecture was built for human access. It broke in the agentic era." End quote.
Yeah.
Mr. Rohit Chaudhary, Databricks and Snowflake are combined worth over $100 billion. You're challenging that very premise now.
I think the customers are challenging that premise because, we are just reflecting what the market is telling us because, think of it this way, that if the operational cost of running your human access to all of your data was already breaking the bank, then the agentic access to the same data is going to cost massive budget shift.
Uber.
Yeah, we've all heard about token maxing, but we haven't heard the last of it. That was the first incident.
Correct.
I think we're going to hear a lot about that. So I think, the 2 points that people will have to figure out, and this is my fundamental belief, and this is not an original, I think this came from Frank Slootman, that at the end of the day, the better architecture wins.
Right.
And a disaggregated hybrid architecture is the right architecture. There is no amount of governance that you can install that will reduce your OpEx. It's not possible.
Yeah, that's true.
You have to have the best data sets available instantly in a highly performant manner at a reasonable price which justifies the operations. Because if your revenue or top line is not growing, then there's no point in increasing your IT costs. So I think that's definitely going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years.
Tell me this. I mean, we had Mr. Michael Cronin, who is the managing director of Couchbase, right? He works very closely with banks, as you do as well. And I remember one of the takeaways that I had from that conversation, Rohit, was he kept on reiterating the fact about data. So I would really like you to elaborate on that, because he felt that time and again, that is the stumbling block when it comes down to, let's say, legacy systems of banks, or for that matter, BFSI. And he says time and again, that is where things are faltering. And maybe that's why the phrase got coined, which was death by 1,000 POCs. So
let me just extend that argument.
Sure.
So if you look at AI, what it has done, the companies that are most in focus at the moment are OpenAI and Anthropic.
Sure.
And, coding as a complete field or discipline or area of work is completely disrupted. Every single engineer that I know of is using some form of code generation or, tooling. What it has done is that it has completely disrupted the build time. So if you are a person with good ideas, structured thought process, and a clarity with what you want to build, then you can build that.
Yes.
What does that mean? That means that, the total number of enterprise applications will balloon from 1,000 to 10,000.
Agreed.
My CFO is building financial applications. And the question that I have for him is that, Sam, are you going to take a call at 2 a.m. when your application fails? So that is something that, the enterprises are at the moment not considering seriously enough, that for these applications to run in a secure, governable, explainable, and understandable fashion, you need a runtime.
Oh, yeah.
And that runtime has to have the same accountability and responsibility. But let's get back to the other point, which is when you have data coming in from another 1,000 applications and another 10,000 applications in the next 5 years, that data problem is going to become bigger and bigger. Because the insights, which is the harmonization of the data that you're collecting from all of these applications, has to then feed back into your agentic workflow so that you can make decisions around advertising budgets, marketing budgets, supply chain optimization, procurement controls. That is a combination of both system of records and analytical systems. And I think the more applications that the enterprise is going to bring to life, the worse the data problem will become. And therefore, what we do is super important for everybody to be successful with AI.
Which is nice. The fact that you've, in a way, found the nerve, and that's what you're trying to constantly hone in a way. Do you also feel, Rohit, at some level or the other, with these regulated sectors, it is probably because of, the sheer sensitivity of data and the regulations which are there, the progress is going to be a lot slower as compared to the other sectors?
I think enterprise AI diffusion is obviously slower than consumer AI. It is slower than prosumer AI, right? And that is a fact of life. But it's not the worst thing. I mean, once you see momentum gathering, for example, when cloud came around, it was expected that on-premise infrastructure will go away. It hasn't.
Right.
Probably about 10% of the data is in the cloud, 90% still exists on-premise. I think, that balance is shifting over a period of time as enterprises figured out their cloud strategy. It became easier for them to do it in a mindful way. I think the enterprise AI strategy is getting defined right now.
Okay.
I would say we have hit 75th percentile in terms of where the policy is. But I think in the next year to 2 years, there will be a very strong roadmap and reference architectures that will evolve. And at that point in time, you will see massive amounts of diffusion of enterprise AI. I think the three areas in which I see AI being most effective, one is obviously front office, customer support, success.
Fair enough.
Everybody understands that. Then there is the back office, which is, office of CFO, office of the legal officer, supply chain procurement. And then obviously the middle, which is, the daily workers, people who are doing day-to-day jobs to move the company forward.
Sure.
And I think, there are like different levels of penetration right now. But over a period of time, all of this is going to get commoditized and pretty accurately, justifiably, I would say that AI will penetrate these areas. Now, the question is, are we looking at a 5-year timeline or are we looking at a 2-year timeline? I think we're looking at a 2-year timeline.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then I want to ask you this. What are your thoughts? Because you mentioned tokenization and, you feel that is going to balloon further, etc. All that. What is your thought on the fact that the way enterprises are implementing AI? Because you were just talking about, the 3 different layers, you're talking front, back, and the central mid area, etc. But do you feel, Rohit, in a big way that organizations are probably just running like a headless race right now because of this fear of missing out as far as AI implementation is concerned, because there is this constant buzz. My fault. There's this constant buzz regarding the fact that, Rohit implemented it. Why have you not? And the investors are constantly asking you, Sudeep, what are you doing? Rohit is going to leave you behind. You're going to be lying in the dust. And then I get excited. I do something and I throw out 35 people. And then I realize, wait a minute, AI is not really giving me the solution. So I bring back 45 people.
So zooming out in the broader scheme of things.
Indian IT is where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I understand. In the broader scheme of things, over a long period of time, you find that, there are obviously some really radical shifts on the curve. But when you look at it from a 5-year horizon perspective, the curve will appear extremely smooth.
Okay.
And I think what is going to happen is that companies are definitely under competitive pressure. The reduction of OpEx is a big topic. I think everybody is looking at what is AI doing for their business today. And they're looking at it from 2 lenses, one which is growth, the other is productivity. I think productivity has been easier to sort of act on. Growth has been harder.
Correct.
I think the way that I look at it is that growth will trump, productivity options. And I think companies that apply AI in the growth path will be more successful than companies that are just trying to become more efficient.
Well said. Well said.
And so I think the winners and the losers will start separating from each other in the next, 2 to 3 years.
So then, does that mean that in a way you say that the way Indian IT is approaching this as on date is a positive way that they're doing it? They're doing it with us in a slightly more circumspect sort of a way. For example, the collaboration with an OpenAI or an Anthropic, etc., where you have forward deployed engineers and they're using their network of 30 plus years in terms of the legacy that they've built with their customers, with trust, etc., and they're getting them to deploy. Do you feel that's a good idea?
So the goal of the enterprise is to accomplish some kind of autonomy. And there are ranges of autonomy, right? Which is, I want completely seamless operations, which has no human in the loop. And then all the way from there, you can say, all right, this is the permission loop. If you think of how that is going to get accomplished, it's not going to get, or it won't be possible by just these model companies. The technology is extremely powerful, but the diffusion of this technology is not possible by one company or 5 companies.
Fair point.
It will require the broad-based training of a huge amount of workforce, let alone the operational requirements of these new applications, new business models that will start emerging in the next couple of years. So yes, coding as a field, application development as a field is a challenging area for IT, Indian IT, or wherever IT companies exist. But I feel that there are bigger opportunities which are coming in the operate phase, in the transform phase. And I think, there are like massive opportunities for the diffusion of this kind of technology. And I don't think it's possible without the association or the aggregation of the model companies, the product and technology companies, and the services folks. I think they have to come together for the diffusion.
Okay, then that brings me to this point, which is the fact that I would like for you to please shed light on Acceldata's role as far as GCCs in the country is concerned, Rohit, because there has been a huge upsurge as far as the entire ecosystem goes. We are right now at 2,143, if I'm not mistaken. The aim is to go up to about 5,000 plus by 2035. Please, I would like for you to maybe share what the journey has been like and what will it be like.
I think GCCs are a massive competitive advantage for companies that are setting up in India. I think over a period of time, what has happened is that, Indian IT produced some really good engineering talent.
For sure.
And that engineering talent has moved from just T&M models into, product-based capabilities. American companies are looking to access talent no matter where they are. And they're very far-sighted in terms of, either they bring the best people onto American soil and they develop those products and capabilities.
But with the present H1B situation?
I think, again, long-term, this is just a minor blip in, their policy. But they've also been very careful in sort of establishing. So the place that we are here, if you drive another 5 miles, all the companies that you see have either an American origin or an American association. The best of the companies, they are essentially here. So I think global capability-wise, I think these centers will play a huge accelerating role as they have now been managing critical data platforms, critical AI platforms. And I think all of this is only going to accelerate the autonomy that all the enterprises are chasing. I won't be surprised if the total impact of these companies and their GCCs is over $200 to $300 billion a year.
Wow, that's remarkable. What about Acceldata's, for example, role as far as the GCC imprint in India is concerned?
We have a pretty large center. We believe that the engineering talent over here has come of age, and we have the ability to hire some of the best engineers in the world over here who are as good as our global counterparts. We're very excited about, how we are going to develop this center further. So, in the next couple of years, we will most likely triple our center over here.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
It's very encouraging to know. But I have to ask you this, Rohit, when do you see probably that entire adjective changing, right? It started with which I thought was very derogatory, captive centers. Then we went to, capability. Now we are at innovation. When do you see them just being called India offices?
I think it's a journey.
Fair enough. Okay. How far are we from the destination?
I think we are already providing a lot of value. I think it just is a function of value. What is the value that these companies or these capability centers are providing? And over a period of time, a long time ago, a manager of mine said, do more work and more work will come towards you. And that's exactly, that's how it has played out.
Makes sense. Okay, tell me this. As far as the Indian IT is concerned and GCC is concerned, GCCs hired about more than 35,000 people. This was about a year or so, and that's the kind of data that has been there. We know Indian IT has been, unfortunately, been laying off people. But there seems to be, as we are moving forward, do you see that there will be some sort of an alignment that will take place between Indian IT and GCC? And you see a hybrid version taking place? I
think so. I think many IT companies are also involved in setting up those GCCs for these large American companies, or even UK-based companies. So I think the meld is already happening, and I think it's only a matter of time where we will start moving away from pure headcount basis to an outcome basis.
Okay.
And I think most of these services companies, they're very, very aware. They're exactly aware of what's going on in the US, how AI will transform, shift, shape their economy and their value to the company. And I'm sure that, they will figure out the model. The way I look at it, when I zoom out, I think about this amazing technology, and I think about how is it going to get diffused in an enterprise, let's say in Kansas City, or an enterprise in Missouri, an enterprise in Chicago, an enterprise in, Bozeman. And the only thing that comes to my mind is that, it will require a lot of people and a lot of dedication to spread this whole AI across industries, verticals, and everyone else. Sure, the fastest adopters of technology are the technologists themselves. And therefore, there's been massive surge in Anthropic's utilization in terms of coding. But what about the rest?
Yeah.
And there's a huge GDP that is dependent on the rest of the industry.
For sure. Okay. From a point of view of the fact that you yourself are based out of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful center here in Bengaluru, which is essentially providing solutions globally.
Yeah.
Acceldata is center here. what from this point of view, let's say if you were to look at it from a macro view, how about the policy aspect, Rohit? Do you see that the policy is moving hand in hand with the kind of investments that are coming through, for example, or with the way that one is projecting this entire ecosystem to boom in a big way? I'm talking about the GCC aspect.
I think if you leave, the more recent changes in policy, I think if you take a look at the last 2 decades, I think consistently the investment in both IT services and contracts from American companies or international companies and GCCs, they've consistently gone up. Okay. And there hasn't been a reason for us to think that this is not going to be the case. I think there are companies which are extremely innovative today, coming up and providing data to the model companies. And I'm sure that there are newer models of services that will emerge. But what is really exciting to me is the kind of product companies that we have started seeing coming out of this ecosystem. I mean, and it is not very surprising that these companies are emerging out of this location. If you have been working on big data, for example, for the last 10, 20 years, the solutions that you start building are in that space.
Sure.
So it's the adjacency and the awareness of that space that starts fostering entrepreneurship. And if you look at Indian entrepreneurship, it's just phenomenal right now.
No, that it has been. But then what's your thought on the fact that, there has been a lot of startup funding, which is kind of started to dry out as far as India is concerned. More than $39 billion, if I'm not mistaken, has been wiped away as far as FDI is concerned, etc. So do you feel that those are areas of concern?
The capital allocation is obviously a big priority for whoever's putting in the money, and we have to take it in our stride.
Okay.
The long-term thesis is that, we've got the best talent and, we have the capabilities of building global products. And there are tremendous engineering colleges and tremendous engineering talent which is coming out. And as long as we can nurture that ecosystem, I think, we are in good shape. A couple of years of blips here and there, I think in the long term,
it's not going to have so much of a ramification. It's not going to have a
material effect.
Too much of an impact. Tell me this, as far as security is concerned, right? Now that is something which is very, very central to Acceldata as well, right? Given the fact that, there was this entire aspect of MeitY's coming into the fore, the way the US government reacted, there was a ban, today it was lifted, it's been about 18 odd days. What are your genuine thoughts as far as sovereignty is concerned? Because it kind of, genuinely ignited that discussion again.
I think so. I think sovereign AI is a reality. I don't think it is being discussed as a temporary phenomena. I think when I talk to CIOs and CDOs across the world, I think there is an absolute desire to have an interoperable software stack. There is also a desire to have a model stack which is based on open source software with open weights. And I think, we'll see that movement gaining strength. Models are great. OpenAI is fantastic. Anthropic models are amazing. But what good they are, or what good are they to you if you're not available?
Correct.
And if you're building your business on that, then obviously it is a risk to that. And I think enterprises will have to, progressively think about how they build their model stack. And I think, that is another area in which a lot of CIOs and CDOs have spent a lot of time. And I feel that a combination of LLMs and SLMs is the future.
Okay. So your thoughts in terms of where probably we need as an Indian ecosystem to push for, to start to probably achieve it a lot quicker than probably what we have been able to do. Because I think this has been a wake-up call, because a lot of enterprises suddenly got disrupted in a big way for these 18 days. There were probably projects they were working on, and suddenly we had to gravitate towards open source models, etc., and things like that. Which, by the way, Anthropic has mentioned that Kimi K2.7 has beaten it, or whatever is the case. People have been all excited about it. So, what are your thoughts on that? Where are we going wrong, if at all?
I don't think we are going wrong. I think this is the early phase of a 100-mile race, and we're still on mile 0.5. And I think the evolution of this industry will surprise all of us. So if you look at the future, chips are going to essentially become, definitely cheaper. Memory is going to come at a much lower cost in the next couple of years, because there's going to be a glut of memory. And I think on maybe 4 years' time. But here's what I've always found, that when there is a massive capacity constraint over some commodity, good engineers go find a way around it.
Makes sense.
And I have a belief that we're going to see the advent of models which are completely independent of the current resources available.
You're a brilliant engineer yourself.
Above average.
Love the humility. But I remember we had a conversation with Vivek of Sarvam. And a big shout out to him because they got the funding recently, etc. And they're doing wonderfully well. But he said something, Rohit, which I thought I'll mention to you as well. He said that, somewhere it might be a good idea for us to start looking at frontier -1 models or -2 models and keep chipping away. And then we finally are at a place of building frontier models. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the goal is autonomy at the end of the day.
Fair.
The goal is not to win the model race alone. The goal is to bring intermediate levels of productivity gain, intermediate levels of business innovation. And for that, you don't need always the best model.
Okay. What's your thought on the entire MeitY's bit? According to me, it was one of the most brilliant business strategies. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great marketing team.
It is, na?
Yeah.
I thought as much. Kuch to tha. But I have to talk to you about the funding bit. Total funding has been $100 million as far as Acceldata is concerned. It has been named in the Lazard VGP AI infrastructure 40 from over 2,000 companies.
Thank you.
Customers include Dun & Bradstreet, PhonePe, HCSC, and Pubmatic. So what does Acceldata have that Databricks and, for example, a Snowflake cannot simply build
the hybrid architecture? We have the hybrid architecture, which runs interoperable software across your different locations, whether you're running it on a data center on-premise, or whether you're running it on USDC East, or whether you're running it on AWS Singapore. Doesn't really matter. You can run the same interoperable hybrid piece of software.
So what was let's say, for example, when you were starting out, Rohit, was this forever envisaged? Because, I mean, you obviously had somebody like a Databricks and Snowflake to, let's say, compete against or contend with, etc. So did you, strategize this as a vision? And what was probably the biggest challenge that you probably faced?
I think most of these are derived from your architectural understanding of the world. And, engineering follows physics. You cannot alter physics. There's the physics of the cloud. There's physics of, fixed cost, low cost, highly performant hardware. And, there are different kinds of compute that enterprises run. And when you just put that jigsaw puzzle together, I mean, the answer is fairly clear.
Right.
I think we stumbled upon this answer as a derivative or a harvest of our own product work, which we were doing in 2021. And then in 2022, it became very clear that, this is the direction to go, because there are no real guardrails as far as cloud is concerned.
Right.
There is no real guardrail.
Right.
And so, while it is absolutely a must to have a cloud strategy, because otherwise your business suffers, I think there is an element of how much is good and at what point in time you start rationalizing. And this is not just in this industry, but if you look at any other industry, in periods of growth, there is an absolute move towards growth at all costs. But as soon as you start figuring out that, we've accomplished what we set out to do, you start optimizing for the real OpEx cost. And so we understood that this is a phase of growth, and then there's going to be a phase of consolidation of architecture, of rationalization of tools, technologies, personas. And we knew that this is going to be the time.
Tell me this, I mean, whenever you are implementing a solution for a company, let's say, I'm pretty sure, since you said cloud does not have any guardrails, how is it that conversation of, let's say, security come into the picture from, let's say, the customer, or sense of ease, trust, etc.?
So let me clarify my statement. When I say guardrails, I'm talking about financial guardrails. I'm not talking about security guardrails.
Understood.
The security guardrails have been proven. Cloud is a definite part of any architecture in the world now. There is just no doubt about that. You cannot actually provision. All companies don't have the capability of running their own data centers.
Yes.
You are dependent, we ourselves are such large partners of, most of these cloud providers. The way we look at this whole thing is that there are a certain set of parameters that any cloud provider, any service provider has to comply with. Software vulnerabilities are going to increase, attack vectors are going to increase, surface area of prevention has to increase, and people will have to spend a lot more time validating their software development lifecycle, because now the speed of build is going through the roof.
Plus also the speed of attacks, which kind of gets in a way complemented to that speed of the build.
Yeah.
$1 against $735, if I remember correctly. That is what I'd said right at the top.
That's the opportunity for even companies like us to build into.
Well said. But tell me this.
I didn't know the number, by the way.
Isn't that a yawning gap?
Well, sometimes,
AI capability, Rohit, is $735 you are spending. But when it comes to the security aspect of things, it's only $1.
So the difference is that the security stack is already built. The security companies have done a phenomenal job in endpoint security, device security, perimeter security, data loss prevention. I can keep going on and on and on. So I think the security stack is already there. It just has to be adapted to sort of, what these new AI companies and models and tools will bring. And I think, the industry moves together. It's, almost like gymming together, that you have a gym partner and you say, okay, all right, let's go lift weights. So
we should do that, by the way. But having said that, I want to understand this. Are you seeing probably a lot more awareness coming through?
Absolutely.
As far as, let's say, the top management is concerned, because
absolutely,
that mindset of wo to IT dekh lega, has that stopped somewhere?
I think so. I think this. In fact, you'll be surprised at the number of AI initiatives the leaders are driving by themselves.
Give me an example.
This is the first time that I know that the CDO of one of the largest public companies has mandated himself and his entire team to build AI applications themselves, run it, and then come up with the list of issues, and only then they're going to hand it over to DevOps. I hadn't seen this level of intensity in the past.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Which means then, logically, Rohit, there would be some form of a metric that would be driven or given to the organization, which I personally feel is very important when it comes to AI adoption.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's one of those two growth metrics that we talked about, or two metrics that we talked about. It's either growth or it's productivity gains. And both of those are getting measured pretty actively. I mean, we ourselves measure ourselves that, what is the rate or the increase of velocity in either GTM or in product development or in program management or in customer success and support. And each of these functions categorically have become more efficient, more productive in the last 12 months.
Fair. What are your thoughts given the recent developments as far as, one of the cases I talked about when that was Meta, then there was the very popular Air Canada case, if you remember. Now, with agentic AI now taking front and center, how are you kind of probably going ahead and educating your customers on it, for example?
So we just launched, with the XLake platform, we also launched something called the AIO, which is the agentic, Acceldata agentic observability platform. And the goal of that is to actually monitor your entire life cycle, which is all the way from your prompts to the agent outputs to the token generation that you did and the deviation from the mean and the accuracy. And I think as more and more agents get deployed in the enterprise, the capabilities of monitoring and observing these outcomes, which are happening at machine-to-machine speed, which is extremely high, is going to be the most critical one. So earlier in the conversation, you were asking me, what is going to stop enterprise AI deployment? I think the unavailability of the right guardrail could become a big problem.
Which according to you is? Could be?
Security, access control, governance, explainability of actions taken on behalf of Rohit. Rohit's agents will behave as Rohit's, and therefore they will be able to explain. They should be able to explain their actions as Rohit himself. The eventual accountability of that agent action is with Rohit nevertheless, because we eventually get into the agent assurance or the agent insurance business, because if work is getting accomplished, who's going to take accountability?
Correct.
Right? And therefore, for example, if the underwriting process says that, so he's not going to get this insurance done, so we might actually file a case, which then the enterprise still has to fight.
Correct.
Which means that it has to stand behind the actions of the agents and have the capability of correcting it. So I think these are massive capability gaps that we saw. We are filling them up, but the adoption of this will be extremely surprising.
Would that also require a significant amount of alignment when it comes down to, let's say, the legal aspect of things, to be honest, Rohit, or the policy probably going ahead and backing it up? Because for the Air Canada case, if I remember correctly, there was the judgment went in favor of the customers, because that's what the bench said, that since the claim was there and the agents were being deployed by you, so you suddenly cannot just shirk off the entire situation.
It's the same argument as I was making, that the eventual accountability is with the enterprise. Whether a person does it or an agent does it on the behalf of the person, it's still the same enterprise that is getting represented in action, words, and outcomes.
Fair
So
enough.
I think the legal envelope will enclose all of these actions.
We'll have to
together.
encompass it moving forward. Fair enough. Okay, so again, I'll quote this. Now, this is your co-founder and CTO who said this. We are building the operating system for the AI native enterprise. One runtime spanning every cloud, data center, and edge. This is Ashwin Rajiva.
That's right.
Right? Now, what is the enterprise that gets data and AI governance right look like, let's say, in 3 years, according to you?
I think a few things. It has identified the right model architecture. It has identified the right data and AI infrastructure. It has figured out its governance models, and it has figured out its cost profile.
Right.
Once you get these 4 things aligned, I think the rest of it is project definition and outcome verification. But unless you put these 4 things together, I think the challenges are too many. For large enterprises, this might take a little longer, and this could potentially take 3 to 5 years. But once it's in place, you will actually see a dramatic rise in both growth and productivity.
Fair enough. Before I let you go, Rohit, I have to do a very quick rapid fire with you, which I never told you about.
Sure.
Indian IT, moving forward, how do you see it? Good, bad, ugly?
It will succeed.
It will succeed perfectly. Okay. Cybersecurity, a huge risk as on date, will continue to grow further and further. What should be the strategy as far as the defenders are concerned?
Huge opportunity for all entrepreneurs building in the security space.
Fabulous. All right. Thirdly, AI adoption moving forward. How do you see that happening at an enterprise scale?
Accelerating.
Big time. Fourth, Indian AI, the sovereign Indian AI push. Do you see that flourishing into somebody as a nation? Would we be leading?
It's real.
Fair. Final question. The fact that AGI, is it coming?
I think we are already in a world of AGI.
Okay. Final question. This entire aspect of this bubble, is it true or not?
Hard to say. It appears that some pockets of the market are inflated, but then technology is real. So very hard to say.
Fair enough. Rohit, you have been, as always, a champ. You bowled right arm over the wicket, I believe, and you swung it in brilliantly. And of course, this is hoping that Acceldata keeps doing some wonderful work onwards and upwards. And there is a wonderful little opportunity of between $1 and $735. That's where
Thanks for letting me know about that opportunity.
Well, that's what we do on Front Page. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what an enthralling discussion with the founder of Acceldata, Rohit Chaudhary. Please look out for Acceldata out there. They're doing some fabulously interesting work. They are talking about, of course, also the fact that they will be expanding their center here in Bengaluru, which is providing solutions globally by working locally. Yes, and a lot more. Of course, we'll keep coming your way through Acceldata. But for right now, I would love to hear what are your thoughts on this discussion in the comments below. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Front Page by the IIM Network. Like, share, subscribe, and always remember, think AI, think AIM.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ML file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Pi project created. There is requirement, and this is the environment. So just this is the app where you have a Pi cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker. And these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of rounding. So we have low confidence that the response is rounded.
AI prototypes are everywhere, but very few professionals know how to deploy AI where businesses actually operate. Introducing the Certified Forward Deployed AI Specialist by Adasi, a certification designed for the new generation of AI professionals who can bridge technology, deployment, operations, and business execution in real-world enterprise environments. Because modern AI success is no longer just building models. It's about making AI work inside production systems, customer workflows, and enterprise operations. The future belongs to engineers who can take AI from demo to deployment. This certification is ideal for AI engineers, solutions architects, technical consultants, Gen AI practitioners, developers who want to move beyond experimentation and deploy AI systems that create measurable business impact. The future of AI belongs to professionals who can take intelligence from concept to real-world execution.
There are a lot of models available on Amazon. You can use any model. For this particular workshop, I'll go with Llama 3. It's the simplest, easiest, and in terms of cost, no problem. But yes, if you are an organization, you want to go and work, you can use Anthropic's Claude model. You can use any of these models. So this is the 2ml file. And what you need, all of you, is you can see there is a Docker file also created. There is a Py project created. There is requirement, and this is the environment. So just this is the app where you have a Py cache. So this is your cache. Init.py will not have anything, that is for initialization. This is your actual agent script. And then here you have got a README, which you can use automatically running in Docker, and these things come automatically. You can click on data store. You can click on the tool name. So this is tool 1. It's a data store. You can give the description. Now I'm going with the lowest score in terms of grounding. So we have low confidence that the response is grounded.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. I'm Antara and you're watching Point Break. For nearly 3 decades, the global technology industry followed a familiar formula. American and European companies owned the customers. Indian IT firms supplied the talent. That model built giants like TCS, Infosys, Wipro, HCL Tech, Tech Mahindra, and Cognizant. But something appears to be changing now. Persistent Systems has launched a 1.27 billion euros takeover bid for Germany's Nagarro. Coforge acquired Silicon Valley-based Encora for $2.35 billion. Infosys acquired Optimum Healthcare IT. Across the industry, mid-tier IT firms are increasingly using acquisitions to buy customers, geography, and capability rather than recruit their way there. So today's question is pretty simple, really. Is Indian IT entering a new phase where growth comes less from hiring and more from ownership? And if that is true, could the next Accenture be built right here in India? I'm Antara. This is Point Break. Let's get right into it. My first guest has built one of the most closely watched research and intelligence platforms tracking Indian IT. Gaurav Vasu is the founder and CEO of Unearth Insight, a research firm that gives CEOs, sales teams, venture capitalists, private equity firms, and large enterprises business and financial intelligence on Indian IT and the broader technology service landscape. He, in fact, brings over 13 years of experience in business consulting, competitive intelligence, and analytics. And the timing for this conversation could not be better, because within days of the Persistent Nagarro deal being announced, Gaurav had already published his own independent analysis of it. Gaurav, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on Point Break. And joining him is my colleague Ajay Rag, tech journalist right here at AIM. Ajay has in fact covered Indian IT's pricing models, AI transformation, and M&A activity extensively, and just wrote AIM's own deep dive into the Nagarro deal. Ajay, it's good to have you here as well. All right, Gaurav, my first question is to you. Would you say that Indian IT has sort of exhausted the traditional outsourcing model, or is customer ownership now genuinely more valuable to these firms than talent ownership?
Thanks, Sandra. Glad to be on your show. If you look at, if you ask me what has changed in the last couple of years, both are equally important. Let me put it this way, right? So it doesn't mean that, the traditional model of talent dependency versus customer being important, customer first or talent first. I don't think both are still equally relevant. Okay. Let me actually take a step back and, help you understand what's happening in the CIO's world, right? If you look at a customer who's buying enterprise technology products, platforms, and then services on top of that, I think that's changed fundamentally in the last couple of years, especially in the last 4 years, right? Look at FY22 onwards to FY23, and then once the AI wave, the generative AI wave hit us, right? So from a CIO's perspective, I think the decision points have drastically changed. The geopolitical situation of, how US dependency, if you look at the entire $1.7 trillion tech services economy, close to about 55% of that still North America, right? Europe, West Asia, Southeast Asia, and India still remain all put together close to about 45%. So from an Indian IT services has the outsourcing model changed? Definitely yes, right? Gone are the traditional days of, selling the traditional deals, traditional implementation, SI, product engineering deals, all of that's changed, right? It's largely native AI deals. And when that comes in, your overall growth of technology spend has also contracted, or at least stagnated in some of the markets, right? So North America market still grows at about 4.5% to 5.5%. At least that's been the CAGR for the last 5 years. Europe has slightly overgrown about 6.5%. And West Asia, if you look at the numbers, are very clearly evident, right? In that sort of an environment, if you look at how the CFO, CIO, or the CEO and the sales head in a technology services firms are navigating, are trying to find out how do I add more customers in this current scenario? And that's where organic versus the inorganic growth becomes important, right? So traditional outsourcing model definitely disrupted because of the emergence of GCCs, because of the emergence of AI. That's one of the drivers where the traditional outsourcing or the traditional model has changed. Second, the way the CIO budgets are spent, right? No longer are they buying traditional SAP, Oracle sort of solutions. Cloud transformation and AI embedded services become important. When that becomes important, and the growth has also slowed down, right? A bank is not expanding its technology budgets. It's not, saying that I'm going to increase my technology budget by 5, 7, 8%. I'm only going to contract it within the, the current vendors that I have. And when that happens, Indian tech services firms have to also look at diversification strategies. So if you look at the current deal that you talked about, right? So Persistent Nagarro acquisition is a clear example of how Persistent has realized that they cannot continue to grow at high end. Again, they're the fastest growing, right? To give it to them, they're the fastest growing technology services firm around the world, not just in India, right? 17% or 15% CAGR in the last 5 years. But to sustain that growth, Antara, they need to look at new markets, new geographies. And if embedded AI becomes, a way forward for most of the deals, can they continue that growth path? And that's why inorganic growth of adding customers less than 9% revenue coming from Europe. And now with this acquisition, they will be high double-digit customer segmentation. So it's a more diversification strategy. So If I again, take you up at an overall level, if you look at M&A has dominated in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Last year, I think we spent about $5.5 billion, the Indian IT services, to inorganically acquire firms. And this year, our prediction at Unearth Insight is about $6.5 billion, of which, you can see the numbers of transactions that's happened in April, May, June. We're already close to about $2.5 billion plus, right? So I think this is going to be the way forward, right? Which means when the traditional offshoring and outsourcing model has been challenged by AI, by the fact that the geopolitical risks have also increased, and that's why the technology budgets of a retailer or a bank or a manufacturing client in the North America market is not going to grow at double digits. And that's why diversification becomes very, very important. But your question of talent versus customers, both are equally important. The way the talent is going to get embedded is also going to be extremely different compared to the last 4 decades of the playbook that we had. The way clients are going to be acquired, if you look at historically, companies had 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to grow and add hundreds and thousands of customers. I don't think, the investors or, the boards and the CEOs have the patience to grow in that slow pace. That's why M&A becomes a automatic lever to grow inorganically.
Understood, Gaurav. And thank you for clarifying that. Ajay, my next question is to you. In your reporting, Sanchit Veer made a sharp point, right? That this bias incumbency persistent could not have manufactured, not merely capacity it could have hired. Walk us through what that actually means for someone who's, outside the industry.
Yeah, Antara, thank you for having me and thank you for the question. So when we look at the IT industry, incumbencies basically are, building the trust, credibility, and the relationships with, clients. I mean, you can hire like thousands of engineers and build a company, but you cannot really replicate a position where you already manage, mission critical systems for a large European company or like a government agency. So at least for larger enterprises, especially in a geography like Europe, vendors often spend years building that credibility, understanding industry process, things like that. So, I mean, for that's exactly what Sanjit also told me, that, that's what Persistent has been buying. Like, that's what they bought.
Right.
It provides them immense access to clients, sectors, geographies that would have taken a lot of decades for them to build. So AI, at least, enterprise increasingly prefer fewer strategic partners, and being an incumbent vendor may be far more valuable than having a set of engineers. So it's a very thoughtful process.
Okay, understood, Ajay. Thank you for that. I want to shift focus here a little. Traditionally, Indian IT firms expanded by, recruiting thousands of engineers over the years, right? But AI changes that equation. If productivity per engineer improves significantly, headcount growth alone stops driving revenue growth. So Ajay, I'm going to be asking this question to you. You have reported extensively on Indian IT moving away from per hour billing towards, outcome-based pricing, as AI, sort of strips away the visible effort behind a line of code. Would you say that, the same logic explained why firms are buying companies instead of, hiring people right now?
Yeah, I mean, I had this conversation multiple times with Gaurav also. I mean, if you look at AI, if it can automate portions of coding and if you can develop, improve the developer productivity, then there is no point in adding more people. But the scarce asset here is the customer access, access to clients and the domain expertise and the ability to deliver large transformation programs. So that's where outcome-based pricing reinforces the whole shift. Like, clients are paying less for effort and increasingly for the business results. So to win these outcome-driven deals, firms need scale, the geographic reach, like Gaurav spoke about, diversifying from US to other geographies also, and the whole deepening of relationship across industries. So in an easy way, acquisitions can deliver these capabilities much faster than hiring employees organically and building the teams altogether. So, I mean, having said that, companies are not abandoning talent. We all know that hiring keeps happening. So they're essentially changing what they're doing right now. And the premium today is not necessarily on engineering capacity, but on market position, customer relationships, the relevance in the industry, things like that.
Understood, Ajay. Thank you for answering that question. In fact, speaking of acquisitions, Gaurav, would you say that acquisitions are becoming the new hiring? What does success actually look like for an IT service firm in an AI-driven industry?
So acquisition is becoming increasingly important, Antar. I don't know if you followed a couple of days back, Accenture also published their numbers. And interestingly, if you notice in the last 2 to 3 years, the trend has been that, they increase, they are the only company again in the world who also announces their acquisition budgets around the quarterly and the annual results, right? So from 4 billion last year to now this year, they made a commitment of about $9 billion. So that clearly tells you a narrative and a story that organic growth has structurally slowed down. Whichever, for example, like what Ajay said, right? If you have a relationship with, let's say, Fortune 1000 or the 2000 customers, and you want to enter into the other 2000 which you don't have access to, M&A becomes a natural route for you, because hiring hunters is an extremely difficult proposition, right? How do you hire sales guys or hunters in the geographies, be it North America, be it Europe, be it West Asia, be it in India? Hunters who are closer to the CIOs and who can help you get access. So M&A becomes a natural route for you to actually get access to the customers. And as soon as you get access to the customers, what these companies are betting on, what most of the global and Indian IT services firms are betting on, is to actually look at, can they upsell, cross-sell the AI solutions and AI services that they have also built, right? So I don't see this as a one-off. Increasingly, we will see more and more acquisitions and consolidations. I wouldn't be surprised, if we see more consolidations also, Antara, because the growth has, plateaued drastically from high double digits to about 5% to now lows of 3.5%, 4%, right? And in that 3.5%, 4%, 50% of the growth is actually coming through inorganic, right? So it's also a tougher bet, if you ask me. And, I'm sure probably we'll have another question on integration on this, but it's also a proposition where you get, like Ajay's point and what you guys also wrote, while it gives you access to customers, it gives you access to upsell, cross-sell. It's also a fine balance that you need to have with what's your differentiation. Is your differentiation platform, products, domain depth, or is your differentiation talent as well, right? Or it's a combination of all. So it's a fine balance, that they will have to, and that's where the investor reactions, both globally and in India, are slightly different currently, because they're still not confident how will some of these large, similar size organizations come together and integrate. Right. But yeah, this is going to remain a playbook. I wouldn't be surprised if, going forward, more than 50% of the overall growth could come from inorganic bets.
Absolutely. I mean, the pattern does, point at that direction. Absolutely, Gaurav. Thank you for answering that question. I would say most Indian IT firms, they remain heavily dependent on North America, right? The Nagarro deal itself, it sort of lifts Europe's share of persistence revenue, I believe, from roughly 9% to around 22%. So, Gaurav, is Europe the next major battleground for Indian IT? Would you say that the firms, are genuinely trying to reduce their dependence on the US market, or would you say this is plain opportunistic?
I would actually, again, take a step back and try and look at the global technology spend itself, right? So if you look at Europe as a percentage of the global GDP, if you look at GDP growth, GDP and technology spend, Europe is roughly about 25 to 30% of the 1.7 trillion tech services industry, right? It'll probably remain there. It's more opportunistic, if you ask me. Organizations who were extremely heavily dependent on US want to de-risk. But if you look at the top 5 Indian IT services firms, or maybe extend that list to about top 10 as well, right? I think they are very much morphing the overall technology spend. Like I said, 55% of the global technology products and services spend, US continues to be the big daddy, right? So they are the ones who are buying the new age technology products. In fact, my assumption or our data says that the data crunching that we did on AI spend and AI transformation and cloud spend currently shows that US's dependency should increase for some of them, because a lot of native AI adoption, if you look at Europe, is also comparatively closed, right? So I think the way the services firms would look at is a lot of traditional services would still be driven from Europe because US is still closed. AI adoption in sovereign AI is also very high. And that's why they will look at a lot of European origin sort of firms to consolidate and merge. But I feel this is more opportunistic. Firms which were under single digits in Europe will try to get closer to the overall 1.7 mix, get to about 20-25%. But US will still remain the largest buyer segment for you because that's where majority of tech products, services, AI solutions, and AI services get bought.
Certainly, Gaurav. Ajay, here's a tension that your own article flagged, all right? The same weekend that Persistent announced this year of focused acquisition, it also disclosed a separate $650 million, 6.5-year deal with a US technology client, right? So the Nagarro thesis is, I would say, explicitly about reducing North American dependence, yet Persistent was simultaneously deepening it. Wouldn't you call that a contradiction in itself?
Yeah, so while it appears contradictory on the surface, I mean, I think these two developments can coexist strategically.
Okay.
Like Gaurav mentioned, US remains the world's largest technology spending market, and I don't think any IT service company, whether it's in India or wherever it is, they are not going to deliberately reduce the exposure that they have in the US. I think the objective of Nagarro acquisition specifically is not to shrink the US business. It's basically to reduce the concentration risk by making Europe a much larger contributor to their overall revenue. We spoke about the 9% to 22% number, which is the footprint. So I would call it as adding a second engine to the Persistent's overall revenue rather than switching off the first one. Like Persistent really wants to continue growing North America while simultaneously building greater scale in Europe. And having said that, while IT service companies have been talking about diversification and things like that, I think this particular deal between Persistent and Nagarro will be a playbook for IT service companies going forward, like whether they actually help the IT service company to grow their revenue in Europe. And then we will see more IT service companies following the same path of acquisitions into new geographies like Europe.
Understood, Ajay. Thank you for that. I want to sort of pivot the conversation now. People are calling this India's Accenture moment, right? Accenture spent decades acquiring hundreds of firms globally to become one of the largest consulting and technology companies in the world, right? So Indian IT historically scaled organically. So that looks like it's sort of changing on that front. Gaurav, and this question is to you. Would you say that Indian IT is borrowing a page from Accenture's playbook? And also, which company do you think, is best positioned right now to become a global AI engineering champion? Gaurav.
Well, Antara, I would say the playbooks have changed, very honestly, right? I think if you ask me, are services following more of a inorganic strategy? Absolutely, yes. That looks like as if, they are borrowing a leaf out of Accenture's strategy and trying to go more aggressive on inorganic. But if you look at historically what Accenture also did, right? Like what you called out, right? Close to about 100 plus acquisitions in the last 3 years are more capability acquisition, right? It could be SAP, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Guidewire, Workday. And because Accenture is consulting plus technology plus operations, and Accenture has a business called Song, which is the largest marketing agency in that sense, right? So if you look at its different offerings or capabilities that Accenture offers, I think we'll have to look at Accenture slightly different compared to the Indian IT, because a lot of Indian IT doesn't have two of the big offerings that Accenture has, which is Song, which is the marketing agency component of it. And they invested billions of dollars, and now that's close to about $9 to $10 billion of the business, right? And the second is the core strategy and management consulting business, right? Which is something that Indian IT has never built in some sense, because I think it's a very distinct capability that came to Accenture because of its earlier heritage, right? I would say that even Accenture itself is changing its own playbook. If you look at the kind of businesses that they are acquiring, the kind of acquisitions they are doing are not comparable to what they were doing 5 years back, 3 years back, or 10 years back. And it is going to be more of AI integrated and native AI, right? So if you look at, they bet on AlphaSense. AlphaSense is a competitor of a Bloomberg that has access to a lot of financial data on listed companies, a lot of access to 10K reports and all of the others. Those are the kind of acquisitions or the bets that somebody like an Accenture. So I wouldn't call it as a Accenture moment for Indian IT.
Okay.
And to your other question of, will the services also grow to that level? Honestly, Antara, I feel that it's also going to be much more difficult for somebody like a TCS Infosys also to get to a 70 billion. Accenture has crossed 70 billion, one of the largest player. But also, like I said, keep in mind, they have a lot of other business vertical that adds up to that number, right? I feel increasingly, Antara, the playbook for AI-led technology services is going to be smaller, niche competitors or smaller enterprises which have got more depth on either a horizontal or a vertical, largely domain-led. And to your previous question, which you were asking, Ajay, right, is it'll also be very different compared to the old model, right? So there could be a couple of $100 million companies which specializes in BFSI vertical, couple of more $100 million companies or $1 billion plus companies which specializes in healthcare, or they could even be functional or horizontal specific, right? Which means somebody is solving an F&A challenge and it's become like a multi-million or $1 billion plus organization, right? I feel increasingly the narrative or the playbook that will play out is deep domain expertise. Technology differentiation has actually vanished. In fact, you, me, Ajay can actually, just write some prompts and build a basic app, right? And add some services on top of it and use our proprietary data to actually, then take it to the customers. So I wouldn't be surprised if the past, playbooks are all killed and a new playbook emerges, which is going to look very different. And we shouldn't look at and emulate what somebody else has done, because I think the context and the time and the technology was very different at that time. And given that, there's no difference between Antara, Gaurav, or a salesperson or a domain person in let's say an XYZ technology services firm, because technology is no longer going to be a differentiator. The cost of AI is also going to drastically come down. I think the play is going to be horizontal, vertical domain. And that's where, be it organic or be it inorganic, I think that's how the playbook is going to look like in the future. Gone are the days of, multi-billion, a few companies coming together and trying to build traditional services models and acquiring. I think you will have $1 million+ billion kind of companies much faster if they grow on a particular horizontal or a domain. That's how I would put it.
Understood, Gaurav. Thank you for that. Ajay, quoting your article here again, Failfish called this the most ambitious cross-border acquisition by an Indian heritage technology firm since Coforge and Encora, and arguably more transformative. Do you agree with that ranking? And could we generally see, a $50 to $100 billion Indian IT company built primarily through acquisitions?
Yeah, I do agree because, specifically the Persistent Nagarro deal, it changes multiple aspects of Persistent, like let it be the scale or, the geographical footprint or industry exposure that they're getting out of this deal, or the whole overall competitive positioning in the market like Europe. So, but when you compare it to Coforge acquisition of Encora, it was definitely transformative. But it largely extended the capabilities and, the markets where Coforge already had, upper hand. So I would say the Persistent Nagarro deal arguably represents a bigger leap, when the industry is concerned. And to your next question on building a new company like $50 billion or $100 billion company, it can be possible, but it's really difficult, to do it organically.
Right.
And I think, like Gaurav said, acquisitions have become like a new playbook where Indian IT services company can build such, solutions quickly. And having said that, the bigger question here is that, while we're talking in an AI era, is the scale itself becoming a competitive necessity? If enterprises are deciding, okay, we will consolidate our spending with a small number of globally capable partners, and Indian mid-tier IT firms may face pressure, right? They have to consolidate and become a larger companies.
Correct.
So I think in that scenario, acquisitions could become a far more important pathway to create the next generation of large Indian IT companies. We should look forward to that. Yeah.
Understood, Ajay. Thank you for that. Gaurav, I would like to take another question from you here. Just a couple of days ago, Nandan Nilekani said that AI will not replace a company like Infosys, and that it will amplify those who move with purpose and adapt with speed, right? Persistence bet on Nagarro is essentially, I would say, a bet on scale and incumbency, right? Rather than pure AI capability. Would you say that Nilekani's amplification thesis, sort of actually supports a deal like this, or does buying 18,500 engineers at a moment when artificial intelligence is sort of supposed to shrink headcount needs sort of sits awkwardly next to what he's saying? What is your take on what Nilekani said?
I think you'll have to look at both of them in a different context, and both of them, you'll have to look at it from the context in which it was said, right? So, Antara, if you ask me, I think Ajay has also called it out, right? So now think of the enterprise context, think of a European enterprise context. Now, if you also look at AI adoption throughout the world, right? US remains the largest adopter, from banks to healthcare to hospital, medical devices, retailers are far more advanced when it comes to enterprise adoption as well. On the contrary, if you look at Europe, has also been conservative in terms of enterprise adoption. Consumer adoption on AI has been phenomenal, right? Between my team, your teams, or if you also look at what my parents do using OpenAI's voice features and some of the others, right? But I think enterprise adoption still needs to be watched out for, and that's where, if you ask me, that's where I said consolidation and M&A is going to become a playbook. If you look at Nagarro's play here, or Persistent and Nagarro's integrated play, is to look at tap into that European market, Germany, France, Italy, UK. And if you look at those segments of customers, a lot of them still need to transition to cloud first, right? There is a journey from SAP ESS to SAP HANA and new versions of HANA that they're going to deploy. Right. Only once they have transitioned there, and then they've done, again, since this is a product engineering acquisition, but I'm giving you a larger play, right?
Yes.
A bank or a hospital in UK or a Germany or France will not immediately change their entire technology stacks to all agents, right?
Correct.
SAP still has a huge role to play. Some of the ERPs still have a huge role to play, and they are also transitioning themselves. That's how I look at this. And what Nandan Nilekani also said was very true, right? Because some of these legacy organizations are not going to immediately change their technology stack to completely native AI. There is a lot of room for these organizations to pivot their own delivery models, pivot their own sales model, also pivot their partnership model, right? They can't, partner with legacy ERPs or legacy CRMs or HCMs of the world. They will have to partner with ERPs, CRMs who also bring agents and agentification on an HR technology or a finance technology. And that's the partnership model that needs to change. And that's how I look at it, right? So I'm not saying that, in the next 3 years, 5 years, and I don't know if you noticed, Antara, in the last couple of days, the minute OpenAI delayed its IPO, some of the IT stocks also ran up in the market, right? So does it say that delaying of that is an indication that enterprises are slowing down their technology spend on AI? I think the market is also reading too much into it. I think you need to, think of it from a CIO perspective. Services firms will continue to remain relevant wherever they're able to, like I said, bring AI native mindset, build agentic wherever there is an opportunity for them to partner with the traditional players, the Microsofts, the SAPs of the world, and also partner with the frontier models, because frontier models bring a lot of depth of the LLM models and the data. If they can merge together, there is definitely a space for them to coexist. So I look at both of them very differently, right? So one is more an opportunistic opportunity to integrate two companies together, expand the footfall or share of market in Europe. Now, to your question of will these 18,000 engineers, if you look at product engineering has also completely changed in the last couple of years, right? Digital product engineering, and now with AI-led product engineering, with SDLC life cycles also getting crunched, it will remain relevant. But the question is, how will they repurpose and integrate the two entities? I think that's the right question to ask. And when they integrate the two entities, how will the future of a lot of these 18,000 or the integrated entities going to look like? I think that's a more pertinent question to ask. But there is definitely a room for the ERPs to exist if they have pivoted and they have built agentic solutions on top of what they sell today, rather than the old model of system of records, but no intelligence or engagement on top of it. There is a room for services to exist, because those intelligent system of records and system of engagements and insights will have to get integrated, and there is a room for AI services to come in, not just AI applications as well, right? So I look at both of them slightly differently, but eventually that's where the world is going to move towards, right? So you will have smaller niche services players who will do more with less, and with agentic added on top of the older playbooks they had, and a lot of them carry a lot of customer relationships and domains. That will be critical. And again, Antara, I talked about this with your team and Ajay as well, right? So if you look at even where the frontier models are going, frontier models are also building their own FD, forward deployed engineer, and the services organization. That is because they want to also be closer to customer and understand the process and the data that's sitting inside the enterprises, which is the differentiator that Nandan is talking about, which is what the services companies have.
Understood. Something that I also want to talk about is, for 2 years, the dominant narrative was that AI reduces outsourcing, it reduces headcount, it reduces services spending. Yet, companies closest to enterprise customers are investing more aggressively than ever. Gaurav, would you say that investors are sort of misunderstanding what AI could actually do to the industry, or does AI increase demand for transformation rather than reduce it?
No, I think investors are also in a situation where, Antara, if you ask me about US enterprise investors versus Indian investors, there's a very different mindset, right? So a decent result from Accenture also could result into a big drawdown on the valuation and the stock, because it was not negative, right? They didn't degrow as a company, they didn't degrow. But look at the maturity of the investors in some of the markets. Also look at the opportunities that, for example, if Antara, Gaurav and Ajay had an opportunity to invest on a product or on a services or on a company that's going to be the bet for the next 5 to 6 years and is going to grow much faster, I'm sure you and I would do that, right? Which is, if I have an OpenAI, Anthropic, SpaceX, and a few other cloud players, for example, right? Which is your Oracles of the world and Microsoft of the world, which are actually consuming a lot more of compute, and they're making a lot of money from the AI wave. That's where investors' money will get poured into. And that's where they will start questioning the traditional models of services, because there's a huge difference, right? There are companies which are growing at 10, 12, 15, 40, 100%. Some of the unlisted private enterprise AI firms are growing at 100, 200% as well, right? Well, as compared to, let's say, the traditional services or the ERP models, which are now down to single couple of digits, right? So I think that's the investor's mindset, right? So I myself am an investor. I'm sure you guys will be pouring in your money into the markets as well. Whether it's global markets or India market, I think the investor's question is, how patient can I be with a sector which has actually not given me a lot of results? Plus, to your question to Ajay as well, right? So are we moving towards inorganic direction? Unfortunately, our data suggests that very little indication of that is coming out from the global IT, not just from the Indian IT. That is it really moving towards the inorganic model? One. Second, is it moving towards building AI solutions and apps, which are actually now becoming a big growth engine as compared to traditional services? I think those are the investors' questions, right? So again, if you look at investors in India have been a little more patient with the services, not as bad as what we have seen, except this current deal. Because if you look at this current deal, also pushes a lot of margin pressures, right? Very similar to some of the other European listed players like Capgemini and others. If you notice, typically they operate between 13 to 15% margin, and that's where the concern on the investor side. So that's how I will look at it, right? So if I was but now just wear a CIO hat, right? I'm a CIO of a bank which spends, let's say, $18 billion or $1 billion on technology. I have that budget of $1 billion to invest in running my existing apps. I'm a bank, who's serving Antara, Ajay. I have to have core banking systems. I have to have AML systems. I have to have cybersecurity systems and applications. Here I'm paying renewals on my system of records, right? Then on top of that, I'm adding agentic layers. And I'm also trying to experiment and test what kind of AI and agentic layers come in. And then I have services guys who are actually maintaining all of these solutions, and sustaining these solutions and adding consulting flavor or adding bolt-on applications, as we call it in our technology language, right? The CIO also has a fine balance that he has to do between within the billion, or that billion is also growing at about not within 7, 10, 12%, right? Within that, he also has to jump onto a bandwagon which tells him that the future of my enterprise technology stack also has to be new age to serve the customers of future. And that's where the balance between what the CIO is trying to do versus what the investors are trying to expect from the CIOs and the services companies, I think there is a big gap between these two.
Understood. Thank you for answering that with so much clarity, Gaurav. Ajay, my next question is to you. Your reporting captured what Sanchit called the AI era headcount paradox, right? Bringing in those 18,500 employees at a moment when the industry is debating leaner AI-driven workforces. He sort of argued the bear case mistakes the asset, that AI makes engineering supply cheap, but makes trusted incumbency inside complex European accounts more valuable. So what I want to understand from you is, does that argument actually hold up, or it's just a very clever way of sort of justifying a very expensive, very people-heavy acquisition?
Yeah, so in the AI era, the revenue per employee is actively is on an increasing pace. So now we don't need, we have seen multiple IT companies and tech companies laying off people and all. So now we're sitting at a place where, like Sanchit mentioned, it's not just about headcount. We spoke about outcome-based pricing and how the whole pricing model is shifting. So the whole headcount-based billing model, I don't think will no longer, at least for the next few years, matter. So I think going forward, it's all about expertise having a particular niche and in a particular geography will matter more than the number of employees that you have. So going forward, that will become the case. I think I agree with what Sanjit has mentioned.
Okay, understood. Again, steering the conversation here a little bit, Persistent calls the Nagarro acquisition transformational, right? The numbers back that framing, and yet I would say Persistent's stock tumbled, I believe, nearly 11% to a 52-week low the day the deal was announced, while Nagarro's shares surged almost 90%. Gaurav, you actually published your own analysis on the Nagarro deal within days of it being announced. You called it a tactical rather than transformational in AI capability terms, that it adds scale and clients, but doesn't really significantly change Persistent's AI positioning. What I want to understand from you is, what made you draw that line, and do you still stand by it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Antara, if you look at it, again, if in fact we used to cover and analyze not just them and a lot of other peers like EPAM to Coforge to a lot of other faster growing technology services. So Antara, you need to look at it. So when I wear an investor hat, right, I'm looking at a company which is growing at more than 15, 16, 17% CAGR for the last few years, comfortably growing from a couple of $1 million to $1+ billion, right? So $1.6+ billion. Very high revenue per employee, if I'm not wrong, close to about 61,000 plus, right? Easily amongst the top 5, or slightly better than a couple of the top 5 as well, right? Fast growing, going towards a non-linearity, $61,000, a price to earning ratio of 40 plus. Accenture and Cognizant also don't command that kind of a PE ratio in the US market, or a Capgemini also doesn't command that kind of a, by the way, Microsoft also doesn't command that kind of a price to earning ratio as a large, enterprise product and cloud partner, right? That was the profile of Persistent for me as an investor, right? Back from early 2000s to 2026, there's a huge run up that they've had in terms of what they've done in the growth engine, what they've done on their own AI platforms and products, and the very sharp vertical and geography focus they had, right? Now, in the current situation, if you look at the external forces have changed, right? The way North American deals are signed, the scale and size of which some of those deals are signed, the sizes of deals have also shrunk, right? Now, to grow from here to about a 3 billion, 5 billion, and to your point of, can some of them get to a $10 billion, right? Some of them have spent, even if you go back to Mindtree and LTI days, when those two companies merged together, both of them have spent close to about 2+ decades to actually grow from zero to $1 billion and merge together, right? So I think the challenge there was the market scenario changed, right? And that's where the reason we called it as tactical is very simple, right? Europe was not a big component. Now you're adding that as a big component. Also, the reason we called it as tactical and not more AI driven is if you look at the behavioral pattern of some of the services firms, and again, I wouldn't name because some of them are clients as well, is to actually buy smaller niche, vertical specific, horizontal specific AI, native AI solutions, native AI mindset of people and an organization. And those bets could have actually come at 10x of the valuation as well. Could have been a $10 million or $100 million company and you could have paid a premium. Market would have rewarded that sort of an acquisition a lot more because market would have viewed that as more strategic and native AI North Star that you're trying to chase. And integration would have also become easier, right? Antara, again, given that I've spent more than 2+ decades from consulting world to then being part of Accenture and HCL, we've also seen that integrations are not easy, right? We've seen that in a couple of recent examples as well. And that's why we called it as more top line sort of acquisition. Bottom line is also a challenge, right? So you look at adjusted EBITDA 13%, close to 13+%. Or if you look at core operating margins at about 8%. Now, simple mathematics, if you add the two together, investors' concern was that this is going to further shrink the margins. And that's where the P ratio and the premium that Persistent commanded was actually getting challenged. And that's why we summed it up as from an investor perspective, from an industry perspective, or as an overall bet of organic versus inorganic bet. I think services firms are better off looking at inorganic through native AI players, because I think native AI may not give you access to customers. Yes, I think this adds, like what Ajay said, this adds a Europe angle to them. But it could also create geographical challenges, right? So me and Ajay have also had conversation where he's saying, even with TCS, Infosys, Wipro, if you look at, or even HCL, they all have access to Europe. They all have a 20-30% of the revenues coming from Europe. But integrated, they are still growing slower, right? So that's where we called it out, saying whether it's a strategic North Star deal or more a tactical deal. And we still stand by it, right? I think there are still very interesting opportunities to add on to their existing agentic and AI products, be it in insurance vertical and be it in some of the other verticals, which investors would have liked, right? So that's how I see, to your question on why it tanked by about 10+%, is the investors are now no longer seeing it as a premium focused vertical, horizontal, or a geography bet, but now it's going to become one amongst the others as well. And I wouldn't be surprised, if investors continue to be a little more cautious till they see the integrations playing out. If it's integrated well, then it's a beautiful story where it could actually go on to achieve $3 and $5 billion. But the pace at which it will achieve is going to also be a bit of a question.
Okay, understood, Gaurav. Thank you for answering that with so much clarity. Ajay, your article also makes an important distinction that the deal is expensive by premium, not necessarily by multiple. At roughly 9.6x, it's actually far less aggressive, I would say, than Coforge's and Cora deal at 21 times. So why did the market react so much? Why did it react so much more harshly, I would say, to Persistent than it did to Coforge?
Yeah, thank you, Andra. I think it's mostly about the 140% premium compared to the closing price of Nagarro shares, which has really spooked the investors and why have we priced it so much. But I think it's a very market-driven thing, and I think as Gaurav mentioned, once it gets integrated and once it gets when the margin comes makes sense, and I think it will be a problem. It's just a very market-driven thing. Which resulted in such a huge reaction to the market.
Understood. Gaurav, you flagged that Nagarro's EBIT margin at around 8.3% is well below Persistent's own levels, and that improving it will be a real challenge of sorts. Is the market's discomfort really about the price Persistent paid, or it's about whether margin dilution is going to bite for several quarters before any of this really pays off?
It's a combination of two factors, if you look at, right? One is the concern definitely on the margins. And second, what is the component of next gen or digital or AI that you're bringing in? Yes, definitely. It's got a component of digital engineering services. Both of it really plays in very well to their advantage. But is that a bet that you're taking, which is where the future of the enterprises are going to be? But I mean, if you look at Europe as a market itself, right? So whether you look at listed European players or if you look at Europe as a percentage of, again, some of the companies don't disclose it, but we work very closely with some of them, right? So if you look at Europe historically, is also comparatively lower margin EBITDA and operating in gross as compared to North America and Canada and some of the other markets, including West Asia as well, right? So that's actually the concern, that how will the integrated margins are going to look much lower compared to where Persistent was pre-acquisition. Second, how will you also figure out a methodology to actually push that margins? What are the levers that you're actually going to pull to push that margin up back to the level that the investors liked it at, right? So 15 plus was a comfortable level. Growth, double digits, revenue per employee, sustainably growing over a period of time. How will you actually balance all of this was a bigger concern. And like I said, Europe is comparatively a difficult market. None of the listed players, again, they don't disclose it as well, but none of the listed players cross a certain limit, be it tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or as we call as mid-size versus the boutique firms as well. They don't cross 18-20% EBIT or EBITDA margins for Europe as a market because of multiple factors that come in.
Okay, understood. Ajay, what I also want to understand from you is, I believe Phil First gave what might be the cleanest measuring stick in your piece, right? And don't judge this by whether Persistent becomes bigger. Judge it by whether it becomes more relevant, right? So 5 years from now, what does, you would say, relevant really look like? And how would we know if Persistent got there?
Yeah, that was a question I wanted to ask Gaurav also. I think that we really want to understand. Going forward, I think AI productivity gains will come into picture, and we will have to see how much has it grown, and also the difference in margin between these two companies. Where we'll find the balance right there. Maybe Gaurav also can contribute to the answer. Like, what do you think going forward? What would be the line there?
Ajay, Andra, if you ask me 5 years from now, is very difficult to answer. The pace at which technology is changing, the pace at which some of these agentic solutions are coming out with, and in fact, some of the governments had to control some of the models that got launched as well, right? So it'll be difficult to call out 5 years down the line, how does it look like? But if you ask me, a year down the line from now, I wouldn't be surprised if, on all the ERPs and CRMs and HCM solutions that we have, agents make up a significant amount of the bolt-on solution we have. In some of the digital businesses, like for example, in India, we have Zomatos of the world and a few others which are called as native digital or digital-born businesses. I wouldn't be surprised if the technology stack in some of the digital businesses could be a lot more agentic and AI first compared to some of the traditional insurers or traditional banks and some of the others, right? So a year down the line, I feel more of AI and enterprise AI spend. But how will the future of these two enterprises look like? Difficult to say, because, like I said, the pace at which the transformation is happening on the traditional ERPs, the traditional agentic solution is extremely fast, right? So, but that said, I feel Europe will definitely, if you ask me, in this integrated deal, Europe will play a very big role, and how European governments and how European enterprises perceive AI and how they also adopt AI, and the concept of sovereign AI also gets, how that plays out in the future will also make a big difference to this deal, because any of the tweaks on that could actually make it look extremely positive or extremely negative. Right now, I think it's sitting in between, where it's a balance of the two. That's my point.
Okay, understood, Gaurav. Ajay, was there anything else that you wanted to ask Gaurav?
What about the mid-tier IT firms? We spoke about Coforge, Encora deal, and now this Persistent. I feel like this particular deal has really put Persistent in a very safe position compared to the other mid-tier IT firm peers. Let's say Emphasis or LTM, some other Coforge for that matter. So how do you see like the whole IT industry? We spoke about the mid-tier IT industry. I mean, their biggest bet was the niche, the capability that they have in specific sectors, let's say BFSI and things like that. So how do you see the whole reset, and are they trying to catch up with the larger IT firms with these acquisitions? What sense are you getting?
So I think Ajay, I mean, if you ask me, are they catching up? I think it's very difficult to catch up with the top five, right? If you look at even integrated, these two deals is not even 10% of TCS's revenue, right? Now, can they play that catch-up game and try to cover up for the years? I don't think so, Ajay. We should look at this as more of a catch-up, or are they trying to get to that size and scale? Also, remember, Ajay, that size and scale also slows down your capability to be niche and nimble and be faster in a lot of areas, right? So that's also a challenge. We've talked about what the tier one, but what it does to the equation of tier two, I think, again, if you ask me, how does that matter to a CIO today, Ajay? If you look at a CIO sitting in a North American, automaker, or a European automaker, or a fintech or a bank in the North America market, I think they're looking at it as not size and scale anymore. I think they're looking at it as more niche capabilities and specific domain plus tech capabilities that you bring in, right? So at least increasingly, that's our point of view. I know some of the others have a slightly different perspective, but I feel increasingly CIOs are not going to differentiate between a tier 3 $100 million, but a niche travel and logistics player. And if some of the biggest companies like Accenture or a TCS Infosys are competing, I don't think they will make that distinction as a buyer anymore. I think it's the depth of the solution and depth of the domain that people bring, because technology has made everything a level playing field, right? So today you and I can go into a cloud. You can take our data, you can take a lot of our peers' data and create something. That's why consulting is now on a same platform, right? So no longer a 5 people consulting firm versus a 20,000 plus a $1 billion consulting firm is different, because it's your proprietary data in our domain that makes a difference. Similarly, the domain expertise and what enterprise solution, and you talked about outcome pricing, right? So how are you making an impact on the customer's end customer, right? If I'm a bank, if I'm XYZ bank, and if I'm coming to you as a JPMC or a Charles Schwab or a Vanguard or somebody, right? Eventually, how are you going to serve my customers with the technology that you bring in? Now, you partner with a hyperscaler, you partner with the frontier models, but what is the outcome that you're deriving for me is going to make a difference. I think, this fascination of saying large tier versus mid tier versus small, I think that will also increasingly go away for us, right? As analysts and as media folks who look at it. But does it put some of them at certain advantage? Definitely, yes. By the way, you talked about it making it comfortable. I don't think it's comfortable by any means, right? If you look at two similar size companies trying to come together and integrate, I have been part of two of the large IT services firms, and I've seen how challenging it could be when you're trying to integrate the two, right? So in my opinion, while some of these can actually give you access and some bit of opportunities, but it also comes with a big challenge of how do you integrate the two mammoth organization. Not just for them, I'm just saying, if you look at mid-tier organization, I think they will have to also run much faster, not only from the growth side, but how also they learn, to Antara's previous question of how can they learn from SAP and Accenture of the world, who have actually integrated multiple companies. So if they bring in deep domain talent from that industry or from those competitors, they'll be able to actually balance out the integration very well. Because if you ask me, currently you're going to battle integration challenges, you're going to battle customer challenges, you're going to be meeting a lot of new customers who have not known you, and you're also going to expose both the leaderships together to do that. So I think the challenges are going to be far greater for companies which are betting a lot more on M&As compared. And again, it's a give and take, right? So either you integrate and grow, or you figure out how can you build a different grow. So I don't look at it as what you said, right? That's going to be easier for them just because it opens some more doors. I don't think so.
Got it. I just have one more question to ask. Like we spoke about acquisitions, and like when we take the latest example of Persist and Nagarro also, it's broadly a headcount focus, right? I mean, huge number of employees are joining a new company and things like that, and it's not necessarily AI focused. So I just want to understand, like when we look at the recent acquisitions by Indian IT firms, Do you see this as a challenge where Indian IT companies are not looking at AI as an opportunity when it comes to acquisitions, and they're looking more on increase in scale, increase in geographical presence, and not just AI focused? Because I'm coming from a point where we are going to a point where IT firms are going to compete with like an OpenAI deployment company, which has like a fraction of employees that IT companies currently have. So how do you see the whole AI conversation, right now?
Ajay, don't look at as employees as something negative, right? So I think the conversation, the way it's coming across is, look, I think you will have to look at it as, what the traditional businesses were and the current leadership and the investors ask, right? Like I said, imagine an investor as well, or imagine, you're a CEO, or in fact, it's the hardest time to be a CEO or a CFO or, a talent leader in a tech services firm, because this has never been seen that your enterprise technology stack itself has to change very quickly in the next couple of years. And by the way, this is not just a challenge that the Indian tech services firms are facing, right? You look at ServiceNow, Salesforce, Workday, SAPs of the world, and if you look at even after decent results, they're also getting challenged, right? So I think the whole playbook has changed. And to your question of whether it's a good or a bad, I think we'll get to know that in the next couple of quarters, and maybe maximum in a year or two. To your other question of why are they not looking at native AI? I mean, this is also not an easy question for them to answer. Also, this is not an easy way to navigate, right? So imagine, Ajay, if you're running a 100,000 people organization, couple of $1 billion, and you acquire a native AI. Native AI comes with a certain different, one is it comes with a different valuation, right? Which is it doesn't come at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5x multiple. On a revenue of about 10x multiple is where some of them will integrate. Second, why will a native AI they will love to partner with you, but if they get acquired, the other challenges that some of the native AI will face is how are you going to keep this at arm's length distance, right? Are you going to run this as a separate independent partner or an independent player, or are you going to make this as a part of the products and platform business? There are a lot of other challenges for them to navigate, right? And it's not an easy model to navigate, because both from a seller perspective and buyer perspective, they need to understand where is the synergies that's going to come in. Imagine you acquire a native AI player with 100 million or a 15 million revenue at a multiple of 10x, 8x, 5x, whatever, right? And once you integrate that into a large behemoth of 100,000, that small entity could get lost somewhere, right? And will it get enough R&D budgets? Will it get enough access to go? It will get definitely a lot more access. But is the legacy leadership also a challenge? Is the native AI leadership also existing there? I think there are a lot of questions to be answered there. And that's why I also feel it's difficult for them to take those bets.
And ladies and gentlemen, and whoever has tuned in right now, this is the final thought here. For 30 years, Indian IT succeeded by supplying talent to the world's largest companies. That model created some of India's most successful businesses. But the next chapter may look very, very different. Instead of selling talent, Indian firms are increasingly buying customers as well, buying expertise, buying markets, buying influence. And perhaps that is the story behind Persistent's bid for Nagarro as well. Not an Indian company wants to buy a German company, but that Indian IT may finally be transitioning from being the world's back office to becoming one of the world's technology owners. Gaurav and Ajay, it's been a fantastic conversation. It's been educational, it's been enthralling. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here on Point Break. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm Antara. We'll see you again in the next episode.